Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mind Blown Zone episode 47. This one is called Awareness Bubbles: Why the Ultimate Truth and Facts Don't Matter. Here with Brad. How are you, Brad?
Surprisingly, never better. Particularly excited about this one. How about yourself?
Uh, well, I think I'm having a better time than my hair, which I'm struggling with today. Had a haircut yesterday and just mega self-conscious about it, and it just won't do what I want.
Well, when you get to
So,
my stage, you don't have to worry about that anymore. So be happy that you have some to deal with.
a blessing and a curse.
That's right.
Okay, I'm going to read an intro for this one. It's a pretty exciting one. Uh, this will probably be a favorite of people. I think this is coming from Brad's idea. So here it goes. For many years, we've been searching for a way to explain how and why it's so difficult to convince certain people that they've been fooled and are holding false beliefs. Matthias Desmet, he had a theory called mass formation psychosis. That was interesting, emerged in the height of COVID. And there's also David Hawkins' consciousness levels. These do a really good job. Today, we're going to introduce to you something that we think nails it, just even better than those. It's called awareness bubbles. See, each of us are aware of a certain set of facts and hold a certain set of perspectives, which seem to be inside certain limiting bubbles. We're going to introduce to you 5 bubbles of expanding size that bound most of us to certain thoughts, opinions, beliefs, etc. Ultimately, this will help you understand why certain people can't hear what you say, and perhaps suggest that that friend of yours who always seems to be telling you things that just couldn't possibly be true may actually be inviting you to a higher awareness bubble.
Nice.
You excited, Brad?
Perfect. Yeah, and I just wanted to quickly highlight the two comments about Desmet and Hawkins. The mass formation psychosis idea was interesting, and he got popular, certainly on alternative channels, for trying to explain why everybody was going along with the COVID thing, especially as it drew out, 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years. And his basic idea, he's I believe, a Belgian psychologist, by the way. And he was suggesting that there are these different segments of society. So in a way, awareness bubbles. And effectively, he was saying you have this 25% that bought the COVID narrative hook, line, and sinker, or anything that affects humanity at large. But this was the example we were all talking about at the time. And on the other end of the spectrum, he would say there's 25% of the people didn't buy it at all, right? They were questioning it, they didn't believe it. And in the middle, there's this soft middle, 50%, right? And what he was suggesting in his theory was that the soft middle will go with whoever seems more authoritarian and more noisy. So whoever the loudest group is, whether it's the ones who bought it or the ones who didn't buy it, they'll shift and go towards that loudest authoritarian group, which was obviously the media, the government, the medical community, et cetera. And so that explained why so many people went along with COVID. It's an interesting theory, and I tried to shape it into understanding why things that I experienced when talking with people on various different subjects. And it kind of explains some things, but only in the case of, something as big as COVID was. So it was interesting, but didn't quite do it for me. And also we have David Hawkins' consciousness levels, which I think are very explanatory. Starting at shame and guilt down on the bottom, and at the peak, basically super spiritual avatar level, love kind of thing, and all of us in between. And effectively, he was saying that there was this magic level at 200 where humanity needed to breach this level, and that level he defined as courage, which I think is interesting, but it doesn't explain that. It doesn't explain the overall vibration or attitude that each of us have on all subjects, right? You might be courageous in this particular area of your life, but not courageous in that area. So it's good and I like it, but it doesn't quite do the trick, in my opinion. And that's why we kind of came up with this new awareness bubble idea we're going to talk about today. Anyway, is that any questions on that, Matt?
No, I think that was bang on.
All right. Shall we start?
Yeah, and just to clarify, just like these are mostly like political. Like they're not about like awareness about foods or health or anything like that. It's political stuff, political, spiritual, that sort of stuff. That's the realm we're in. So
Yeah, I'd
you
call,
want to
I'd
comment on
call it.
that?
Yeah, I would just say I would call it like a worldview, right?
Yeah, worldview. Yeah, worldview.
That maybe encapsulates it a little better. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, the first one is called the mainstream presentation layer. And this bubble is referring to the group of people who are aware only of what the mainstream media, institutions, etc., present to them. Right? They're told, they hear it, and that is reality. You reckon that defines it, Brad?
Yeah, that's perfect. It's one of the key attributes of this layer bubble is that everybody knows this one because we're inundated with it 24/7.
Yeah, it's the default. Like if you offer no uh, alternative perspectives, like this thing will is just there. It's just sitting there, dripping off the trees, like oozing down the buildings. Like it will just go into you.
Yep, it is literally unavoidable. It doesn't matter which bubble you're in. You're familiar with this one because this bubble, right, seeps into the other bubbles that question the presentation layer.
Right.
And I would call this. I go back to a book by a guy by the name of Carol Quigley, who wrote couple interesting books, and the one I'm specifically referring to is the Anglo-American Establishment, and he talks about certain powerful and wealthy individuals. We're trying to shape human behavior and attitudes, and they called this the liberal agenda. And it doesn't mean that it's only for liberals, but that was the agenda. And effectively, right, the sell was, to do right. What's the word I'm looking for here? To benefit for the greater good. That was the basic idea that they were going to couch their agendas in. Always, how can we sell it to the people that what we were trying to do here is for the greater good? And that carries forward to today. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bunch of perspectives that on the surface seem to be very oriented toward progress and liberty and love and unity and togetherness, right?
Right.
Seems wonderful.
Right. We have all kinds of examples we could give today, but we need to keep moving through these. But you can think of like climate change, right, as being one where that's maybe the ultimate example of the liberal agenda, right? Is that we're destroying the planet and we need to pay carbon taxes and on and on and on in order to for the greater good, to save humanity from killing itself.
Yeah. And just to go with that as an example, it's like the awareness bubble there is you're told in the mainstream media the climate is changing. Fact, pollution is the cause. People who don't care about the environment are driving the pollution. The solution is to tax those people or take away their power. And that's it. And it's all true. And anything counter to that is not true.
That's right. Yeah. So you say, well, hey, I have a scientist here or a group of scientists that say that they're full of it and none of what they say is true. And it doesn't matter when you're trapped into this awareness bubble number one because you have scientists that say it is true. So, and they're generally speaking, they're the ones who hold the highest positions, right, in various universities or research institutions. And so
Hmm.
they appear to be the better scientists, right?
Hmm.
And you're pointing to what discredited or scientists that stepped out of the mainstream because they didn't agree with the presentation layer. So that's where you end up in that space, right? The people trapped in mainstream presentation layer, awareness bubble one, aren't interested in hearing any other counter perspectives. Yeah,
Yeah, because they're not true.
right, right. And to
And that's it.
them, they're
It's
not
just,
true.
it's like not true.
And so I put a little note in here that this bubble, awareness bubble one, the presentation layer, is the most contracted awareness humans have. Basically, they accept what they're being told, and they're not interested in anything counter to what they're being told.
Right. Yeah. And so, as we said, all institutions, uh, all established institutions are pumping this out 24/7, like media, government, medical establishment, um, global organizations in economy, World Economic Forum, et cetera, et cetera. You go your celebrities, your actors, your musicians, your athletes. They're all saying it. Academia, university, it's just when you're in
That's
this
right.
bubble, you can see this from all sides. Like all the people you respect, all the people who are great, artists and athletes, right? All the people who are super smart in medicine, all those people who are super smart in the law, as you call it, all the people who are like distinguished news presenters, all these powerful, smart politicians, they all say it. And you're just looking around, you're like, every single smart person that I know says this stuff. It's true.
Right. And so there's two potential explanations for that, right? One explanation is it's because they're right, right? Which is what holds people in this awareness bubble, right? And when asked, why do you suppose there aren't people with different views in these high positions? And the answer is because they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. There couldn't
It's already
be
been
that,
proven, right?
right?
The
It couldn't
argument's already
be,
taken place.
right? There's no possible way that these institutions are hiring, rewarding, and promoting people that share a certain worldview perspective and, filtering out and booting out people who don't share that perspective. That's not a possibility.
Now, each awareness bubble has a villain. Well, not each, but most of them have a villain. And the villain for this awareness bubble is Republicans, Christians, and straight white men, right?
Right.
Or any, well, like the wherever the intersection of the most powerful groups in society is, right? Like if you're straight and you're white and you're a man and you're a male and you got money, right? Boom. All those culminate in a nexus of power and you're to blame. All right. You're causing it, right? Now,
That's it.
uh, I want to go from there. The next thing I want to bring up is the victim consciousness point. Brad, do you want to interject something before that?
No, go ahead.
So, what's running in parallel with all these, like, what is scientifically observably true ideas, perspectives that this awareness bubble is holding is this victim consciousness. And every single, like, if you look at this closely enough, you'll find that every single so-called scientific viewpoint or political viewpoint that they have all has a narrative of victim consciousness running through it. For example, like we mentioned, climate change. Yeah, they're talking. There's this whole thing about very smart people called clients, climate scientists have measured the climate over a number of years, and there's academic studies that you haven't seen, but trust us, they're real, and it's proven. It sounds like a scientific thing, but at the heart of that, it's resonating with this victim consciousness that evil people are doing stuff to ruin my life, right? These Republican, Christian, straight white men, rich people are ruining the planet and it's out of my control, right? So I'm a victim here. And no matter which one you take a look at, you'll find the victim layer inside there.
Perfect. 100%. That's exactly right. Yeah, I didn't add billionaires to that category, but you keep saying rich people. But yeah, that's another strangely curious addition to the list of villains, bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and that's exactly right. And right, and we flip back around to for the greater good. Right. So there's only a few rich Christian billionaire straight white men, but there's billions of people who aren't that thing, and
Mm-hmm.
they're the victims.
And therefore, these few can be sacrificed, right? It's okay to direct all this hatred and disadvantage toward them because they're the few, and the few can be sacrificed for the greater good.
Right. Ironically, John Kerry, who flies around in his private jet, is it hits at least some of those categories, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, yeah, I think we've nailed that one pretty good. Anything else you want to add there?
No. You want to introduce the second one?
Yeah, so this is one, I went back and forth on whether to add it or not, and eventually came to the conclusion that it's important to keep in here. And this is what I called this awareness bubble 2. I called it sanctioned or approved conspiracy theories. Right? It's a category where people that have been historically in awareness bubble 1 and start to see questionable things and problems and issues and can't perfectly explain it, they move into this, what I call sanctioned conspiracy theories, to better explain some of the things that, fishy things that are going on with the mainstream presentation layer. And this category is partitioned by the fact that these are people firmly based in presentation layer 1 who now have authorization or approval to go and point out certain entities or groups or institutions that have in fact occasionally been up to nefarious deeds. That makes sense?
Yeah. It is the most challenging bubble to wrap your head around in a way because it's pretty subtle. Um, I
I'll
think
give
mentioning the villain will shed some light on it in particular. So the villains are no longer just like this, like, the villain from number one still kind of stays there. Like the villain is still Republican, Christian, straight white man. That still exists. But there's this other type of villain, and it's military industrial complex, intelligence agencies, and big corporations, but not the totality of those things. It's rogue, like corrupt actors inside those otherwise good institutions that are using their power for evil. And that's the villain. So the people in this awareness bubble, yeah, they're seeing like that things aren't quite right. So therefore, if something's not quite right in a way that they previously didn't understand, well, there must be therefore some sort of villain who's doing it. And they're identifying it, it's this upper echelon rogue corruption. Does that sound about right, Brad?
Yeah, that's perfect. And to give it some clear examples, and I would put people like Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald into this category. So they're very much historically, lived in awareness bubble 1, but they found some problems out there and tried to expose him. Like Matt Taibbi's kind of famous for, talking about after the financial collapse. And he stretched out a little bit further than, was comfortable for people who want to hold still in awareness level 1, and pointed out a few things that were clearly, not on the up and up with the 2008 financial collapse. And then more recently, Elon Musk hired him to look through all the files, the Twitter files, as they're called, and how basically the FBI and DARPA and other U.S. Administrative agencies were censoring and removing people from Twitter prior to Elon owning it. And that's a bit of a stretch for a lot of people in awareness bubble 1, but those are great examples. Then of course Glenn Greenwald is the guy who got a phone call from Edward Snowden and this whole CIA NSA contractor guy, and he stole some stuff and ran off, and now he's allegedly in Russia now, living quite comfortably apparently. But those are two examples of journalists or researchers or professors that are aware of some nefarious stuff going on, and they're put into this category. And just to prove a point, Hollywood will even make a movie about it, like the Edward Snowden thing, for example.
Yeah.
Right. So it's clearly a sanctioned conspiracy theory. They want this to be known, and they want their narrative to be known. That makes sense?
Yeah. And this idea of it being sanctioned is very important because it is controlled opposition. It's like, whoa, people are starting to break out of awareness bubble 1. Now let's put another bubble around them just to contain them, right? Because we don't want them finding out the whole thing, right? So
exactly.
we just open up the bubble a little bit, right? And inside awareness bubble 2, you still think that your ideology is perfect, right? You still believe, in all the ideals of awareness bubble 1, but certain bad actors have penetrated your ideal system and they're the cause, right? So you're still not taking any responsibility that you're in a movement that isn't producing the good that you're claiming. You're not taking any responsibility there, because that's still perfect. It's just these certain bad apples, right? It's just certain bad apples. Otherwise,
right.
we're perfect.
Right. In this category, it's easy to identify because you can keep your job at a mainstream institution and be in this sanctioned conspiracy theory category. Right. Mm-hmm. So you could be a journalist for a magazine or a newspaper. You can be a professor at a university. Right. These people don't lose their jobs when they write about these conspiracy theories. That's how you know you're in this awareness bubble number 2. Yeah?
Yeah. I can imagine people are going to start eventually to feel like if you're just in awareness bubble 1, you're going to eventually feel like, hey, something ain't right. And you're going to want to talk to people about it. Right. But the controlling forces don't want you to go all the way over here and find out that. So it's just, here's a little narrative, right? We'll poke some holes in our own thing and just say, oh, it's a little that, and then you guys can all talk about it together, and you can badmouth the institutions in that way, and everything's totally fine.
Right.
Have fun.
How about it? Yeah. And another way to think about this too is that their solutions, right, for these isolated conspiracy theories that they write about is always some form of remove and replace the actors.
Yes.
Right. It's never that the system, right, the way things work, the agency itself or the corporation itself isn't to blame.
Yeah.
So that's another telltale sign that you're in this awareness bubble.
Okay, right? Great. Shall we move to number three?
Please.
Okay. Number three is another controlled opposition awareness bubble, and it is the the main controlled opposition, right? And that is Fox News, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, Breitbart, your conservative, Republican, exoteric, mainstream Christianity people, right? People that watch, people that vote Republican, people that watch Fox News, right? That's it, right?
Yeah, right. Or
That's the channel.
stretch out a little bit to Breitbart and so forth. But right. But these are so in an awareness bubble 3, which we're talking about now, is these people at some point stop buying awareness bubble 1, right? The mainstream presentation
Yes.
layer, the liberal agenda.
Yes.
And so this is where the majority of the people who aren't buying the totality of awareness bubble 1 come into this awareness bubble 3. Right?
Can I just mention it's really funny to, like Fox News and CNN, they're both on the TV, right? And one day you realize that the stuff on channel one isn't true. And then you wake up and you realize that the stuff on channel two is true.
Right. Right. That pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, that's why it's controlled opposition. It's like it's just another thing from the mainstream media. It's like, oh, here's another little playground for you to play in.
Right. If these guys on channel 1 aren't telling the truth, then they've got to be telling the truth on channel 2. Right? Somebody on TV's got to be telling us the truth.
Yeah, and Fox presents itself like that. They're like, hey, we're the guys who expose what they tell you on channel one. I don't know what the channels are in the US. Like, I don't even know if you have channel names, but like, they're the ones that come along and go, okay, yeah, we understand you've been watching CNN and stuff like that. Well, none of it's true. You found the truth. Come in. Come watch Fox News, where all the truth happens.
That's right. And it's this is again, this is controlled opposition. So the people, the one advantage, the major advantage that people in awareness bubble 3 have over people in awareness bubble 1 is that they know both of the narratives, right? Because everybody knows narrative 1, awareness bubble 1, as we stated earlier, right? So these people are being told that there's a lot of lies in awareness bubble 1. So they're getting a new perspective. So they have in effect 2 perspectives. Right? They reject all of awareness bubble 1, but they can't help but know about it because that's the job of the controllers of awareness bubble 3 is to point out the flaws in awareness bubble 1. Right?
And the arguments that happen between awareness bubble 1 and 3 are quite hilarious because you've got awareness bubble 1 that only know their own perspective, and they know what they've been told the perspective of awareness bubble 3 is. But they don't know anything about it. Whereas awareness bubble 3 knows all about awareness bubble 1. And they're like, yeah, I understand why you think that, but here's what's true. And awareness bubble 1's like, no,
Right.
no.
Right.
Like hands over their ears, like hands over their eyes. Nope.
Right. And this is, I forget what I even called it. What did I call? I used to call something like the two level expert or something like. So the people in each of their respective bubbles they hear the worst things about the position of the opposition, right? From their own echo chamber. They never hear the good things about the other awareness bubbles argument. So they're always know the worst parts about the other side's argument. And that's what keeps them convinced that they're in the correct awareness bubble. I can't remember what I used to. Go ahead.
Well, I would say that the big shift that happens when you go from this 1 and 2 into 3 is that you realize that main awareness bubble of level 1 doesn't actually produce the goods that it claims to produce. Like you realize that it actually produces destruction, like that it's filled with envy and hatred and resentment, and that it's basically just bogus. Like you realize that it is about victim consciousness. Like awareness bubble 3 is about victim consciousness, but like the intensity of the victim consciousness in awareness bubble 1, you see it, and like you actually step back and you see that awareness bubble 1 is a little bit unhinged, like in uh their resentment and hatred of their villains. Would you tend to agree with that, Brett?
Yeah, that's true for all four, bubbles. We'll get to the fourth one here in a second. But yeah, it's a lack of perspective, right? And we haven't made it clear yet, right? They do not want to pop their bubble. We'll get to why that is shortly. But yeah, the people in awareness bubble 1 have the most limited perspective or contracted awareness. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Shall we mention the villain?
Absolutely. There's multiple, or you could roll them all up into one, perhaps.
Well, yeah, I mean, Democrats, the Democrats, atheists, Marxist, communists, liberals, leftists, progressives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
That's them.
I'd say, these are the people who are like the utilitarian people, the for the greater good people. And the thing that Awareness Bubble 3 has is they realize that that's fake, right? They realize that those people were never for the greater good. They were always for themselves. And they're just pretending to be for the greater good to rally people into their power attempt.
Right.
You
The
reckon that's how
controllers.
accurate you reckon that is?
Well, you didn't quite say it quite right. I don't think the controllers. That's exactly right. But for the people trapped in awareness bubble 1, they think that driving a electric car and recycling and all these sorts of things. They really are making an effort, right, to save the
Sure.
planet and save the oppressed groups and not be racist and misogynist and sexist and all the rest, right? So they're making
Yeah.
every effort to agree we shouldn't be doing these things. And the worst part about the people in awareness bubble 1 is that they, short circuit and lose their minds when they see somebody not behaving the way they think they should behave based on for their greater good goals, right?
Right on.
That's when it gets nasty.
Okay. Anything more you want to say about this awareness bubble?
Nope. I think that's it. And these are right. We can categorize all of the first 3 awareness bubbles as all mainstream bubbles.
Yeah.
Right. So we can find information that solidifies our awareness bubble in mainstream television, newspapers, magazines, etc. Even though 99% of them are awareness bubble 1, there are 5 or 6 sources out there that cater to awareness bubble 3.
Yeah. And that's part of the game, isn't it? It's just a small amount. It's the information they don't want you to know.
Right. Right.
Fox News, information they don't want you to know.
Right. All right. I think those all should make good sense. So now it gets interesting. Where are we heading?
Okay. So awareness bubble 4, conspiracy realities and the far right.
Oh boy.
So this is commonly referred to by awareness bubbles 1 through 3 as conspiracy theorists and right-wing extremists. You want to take them from there, Brett?
That's correct. Yeah, this is the only place, right, that you in order to get from if you're not satisfied with awareness bubble 3, this is the only place to go. So it's maybe the hardest leap to make. Right? People in 1 and 2 just wholly reject this awareness bubble because, right, it's not sanctioned by mainstream personalities. So in order to stay away from it, the conspiracy theorist right wing extremism level labels are attached to it. And it's a very difficult thing to do for people because it's not mainstream. That's the only reason people refuse to sniff around in this awareness bubble.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit later about why that is. But we have to say, you know, the poster boy of this level is, of course, Alex Jones, InfoWars, right? He is the guy that, you know, the mainstream occasionally will bring him on and show him, you know, screaming and yelling and losing his mind and, you know, acting like an idiot, right? That's how they present him to on their mainstream channels. And of course,
Mhm.
when you pick out those segments where he, you know, is just, you know, basically loses control of his personhood for a few minutes, this is what the most people see. And of course, there was the bogus, fake Sandy Hook trial thing that was, I mean, perhaps the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. That actually passed for a legal proceeding. But that's kind of what they got him really on the ropes for his one broadcast he made about Sandy Hook. And all he was really doing was reporting on a book that a couple other guys wrote, right? And but he took the fall for that because that spread like wildfire. And anyway, so he's the guy, and that's another technique used by the mainstream is if you can find errors or mistakes that Alex Jones has made over the years, which are numerous, then you can dismiss him entirely because he was wrong about subject X, subject Y, subject Z. And because of that, he's wrong about everything. Yeah?
Sure. Definitely a tactic.
And they do that all the time. And the number two guy that I just wanted to throw on the list is a guy by the name of David Icke. Much fewer people have heard of him. He's British, and he's been on the circuit for close to 30 years, I'd say. He goes a little deeper than Alex, and you know, in recent times, you know, I would say David Icke has at least bled in a little bit to Awareness Bubble 5, which we'll talk about here in a bit. So his solutions are in that direction, which is interesting. Alex still hasn't gone there. Anything you'd like to add there? Can you think of anybody else that's
I mean,
notorious?
people are so arbitrary. Don't they don't hold spots in my mind. But I did want to mention that like any thought leader in this awareness bubble is going to be like massively discredited by mainstream media. Like every single one of them. Like if you look up the mainstream media take on them, you're going to find like dirt, like ridiculing them, just making fun of them, making them seem like a completely untrustworthy, unhinged, uh, vile source of information. Right?
Right. There's no discussion of the topic, right? So they attack the messenger, and it's
Yeah.
always ad hominem attacks on the character of the individual rather than discussing the topic or topics that have been addressed by that person.
Right.
And,
And
you
I
know,
did want to mention as well, before we go further, because I feel like we skipped a point. Maybe we didn't know, but I just want to make it clear. I don't know. The key jump to go to, you know, this awareness bubble 4 is the realization that the mainstream institutions, the establishment institutions, is controlled like by someone, by some group, some powerful group. Like some
right.
powerful group is putting out awareness bubble 1, awareness bubble 2, and awareness bubble 3. and saturating the institutions with it. Like,
That's right.
and it's like a total fictitious controlled thing. And if you're in it, you're totally brainwashed. And you need to get out of it and realize that. That's the transition to number 4. You reckon that's about right?
That's perfect. And that's the perfect segue into people I now refer to as agents of soft disclosure. And there's no better person to point to that is now in Awareness Bubble 4, which is Tucker Carlson. So he was, he was the primetime guy after Bill O'Reilly had to resign in shame. And Tucker took over his slot, right, which was the 8 to 9 p.m. Hour, primetime hour on Fox many years ago, and he started to say too much. I first noticed that I noticed that his research team was looking at the same material I was back in 2017 around the Las Vegas shootings, and this is how he got onto my radar. My mother was telling me he was saying some interesting things well after the rest of the media had all in unison stopped talking about the Las Vegas. I mean, we're not going to go into the details of that, but the whole thing doesn't basically make any sense. The narrative that we were presented, which is typical. And Tucker did a broadcast a couple months after that happened, asking really good questions. And really I told my mother, he went way too far, right? There's no way they're going to let him talk about this anymore. And it turned out I was right. He just never talked about it again. And of course, 3 or 4 years later, he finally snaps the leash that he's on, and Fox just out of the blue fires him, right?
Uh-huh.
He was talking about things that were too far outside the mainstream awareness bubbles.
I mean, just to interject my perspective here, I mean, like, I don't believe that Tucker Carlson's a free actor and that, Tucker Carlson went against Fox and they had to fire him. I don't believe that. I reckon they're all in on it and just constructing the story, but whatever.
Could be. Well, he was certainly saying things that nobody else was saying.
Sure.
I think more interestingly about Tucker is that he was very political in his, earlier, 2000 to 2010, 2010 to 2000. He was very much Republicans against the Democrats. And he, as time went on, 2017, 2018, up to 2021, or whenever he got fired, he was less and less political. And that was also not fitting into, the goals of the people who controlled this opposition station. Right? They needed him to be complaining about Democrats all the time. And Tucker was stretching out of that, getting into a bigger picture that maybe that's something bigger than just Republicans against Democrats. So that was a no-no. And along those lines, Elon Musk was a guy very much in Awareness Bubble 1 most of his life. And suddenly something caused him to break out of it. And of course, the story about him buying Twitter for way too much money. And suddenly free speech on Twitter is allowed. And he's got the most followers, I think, on Twitter, like over 200 million. And he influences a lot of people. And he's way outside the political back and forth. So he's really graduated to this awareness level. People are taking notice. Any comments on Elon?
Yeah, I mean, just so you got Tucker Carlson, you got Elon Musk, you got Candace Owens, and you got Joe Rogan, right? And you've called these the agents of soft disclosure. And a lot of people who listen to these people think that they're plugged right in to the truth, like the full on truth, like the final reveal. But what we're trying to make clear here is that this is like the first of 3 gradients that we're going to identify in Awareness Bubble 4, and that what they're telling is just like tip of the iceberg stuff that people way deeper into Awareness Bubble 4 are aware of.
Yeah. And there's levels to all the awareness bubbles, right? But absolutely, they are very much at the front end of this. And Candace Owens is another good example. She was working for, I don't know, Daily Beast or whatever, one of these online you know, e-zine magazine type things, and she started to say too much, and she wouldn't back down, and so they fired her, just like that. And you still with me, Matt? I had to change
Yep.
headphones actually. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And so she's really of the four that I mentioned here, she's way out ahead of everybody. She has the least amount of control over her, I think, and she's pretty much doing podcasts right now that she chooses. It would appear to me, and so she's breaking a lot of ground. Of course, Joe Rogan is the podcast guy that was actually early in his career. He was much more conspiracy theory mind oriented, and something happened to him. I think he started to see that he was getting popular, and he decided to dial that back a little bit. And he treads around these subjects, but he
Yeah.
doesn't go as far as he did in the beginning.
Well,
And
he
it's
stays
turned,
in resonance with the center of his audience.
yeah, and he's made a lot of money because of it. Had he gone the route of Alex Jones or David Icke or whatever, he wouldn't be making whatever his contract with Spotify was, 50 million or whatever. He would never have gotten that contract.
Radio. So at this grade, 1 of 3, like they're kind of like letting you know there's a thing called the deep state, right? Like a government beyond the government, like people within government who are controlling the government, right? Would you say that's what they're letting you know? Like there's power beyond the power that you thought.
That's right. That's a big giant step to take
Yeah, that must
out
be a
of the
big
mainstream.
step.
Right. It's difficult to consider those possibilities. Right. And
Yeah,
Alex Jones fingers the globalists and the Illuminati, right? Those are his big buzzwords.
yeah. This is like grade 2, right? They go almost all the way, but there's certain lines they don't cross. And as you said, Alex Jones will say, deep state, forget that. What you got here is globalists,
Right.
people with allegiances beyond countries, right? People who are in a big international club, teamed up together, trying to control the world, right? That's probably the Alex Jones level of reveal, yeah?
That's it. Right.
Illuminati.
Right. Somewhere where Tucker, Elon, Candace, and Joe don't go.
Yeah, yeah. Tucker Carlson's not going to come on and say there's an Illuminati.
That's right. And so I guess I'll touch on, since these are all the guys I've read, many, many more. There's the kind of the next level, right? Where we jump to more specific ideas. You got people like Bill Cooper, Jordan Maxwell, Eustace Mullins, G. Edward Griffin, John Perkins. There's, you can go on and on and on. And, what's important to note about all these people is A, they can't get a job in any mainstream institution. They can't get a standard book publisher to publish their books, right? They can't get an interview on a mainstream media channel, right? Actually, G. Edward Griffin did once, believe it or not, with, what's that guy's name? He got kicked off of Fox years before Tucker. Can't remember his name right now. He's got gray hair. Anyway, he did make a big mistake in bringing G. Edward Griffin on, and I'll talk about him in a minute. But they span, a deeper group of villains, bad guys, and they discuss people like the Freemasons, the Jesuits, Zionists, reptilians, demons, Luciferians, all of which sound ridiculous to everybody in the first 3 awareness bubbles.
Yeah, like if you take someone who's listening to uh what's someone on CNN? I forget all these people.
Anderson Cooper, I think, is still there. I could be wrong.
Anderson Cooper. You take someone who's listening to Anderson Cooper and you say Anderson Cooper's raised in a family that worships Lucifer and they're behind the whole thing, you're going to get laughed out of the room.
That's right. Well, but you can produce a lot of information that suggests that there's a possibility there, right?
Mhm.
His family, I can't remember, Biltmore, I can't remember the name, but his mother was a uber wealthy daughter of rich American industrialists, and there's all kinds of stuff you could research on him. He was, of course, he was in the CIA before he joined CNN too. That's kind of strange, isn't it? But yeah, once CIA, always CIA kind of a thing. But yeah, that's so there's information out there, and you can easily reject it as it's just a bunch of conspiracy theory nonsense. Or you can start to look a little deeper and a little closer and start seeing connections. And that's what some of these guys that I mentioned spent their lives doing, really digging this information up and connecting these dots. And of course, David Icke is famous for saying that part of the royal family were reptilians. And his credibility went from like 5% of the population or 3% of the population to like 0.02% of the population after he said that. So he was ridiculed everywhere for saying that. And lost what little credibility he might have had. He lost a ton of it just for saying that word. That's what he's famous for. Oh, the reptilian guy. Oh yeah, he doesn't know anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Just some commentary on just awareness bubble 4 in general. A lot of people are moving into awareness bubble 4, like level, like grade 2, like the globalist Illuminati thing. That's hitting people whom you wouldn't expect it to hit. Like my hairdresser is like, so what do you think about all this P. Diddy stuff?
Right.
So apparently all of Hollywood are like, totally perverted and do satanic rituals. I'm like, whoa. Okay. Like,
right.
Okay. She's like, just 25 and is aware of that. All right.
That's right. Right. This is the soft disclosure that's going on right now. And the shock value is tremendous, especially if you hear that and you're trapped in awareness bubble 1.
Yeah.
And it's less shocking to people coming from awareness bubble 3, right? Because they have that, that Christian Satan Lucifer thing going on, so that it makes a little bit more sense to them in general, right?
Yeah.
So you can see how, depending on which level or bubble you're in, how shocking the next bubble up can become. And one thing I don't think we outlined here, I just want to slip it in here, is that it's very, very difficult to, if not impossible, to hurdle from, 2 through 2 or 3 bubbles, right? Go from 1 to 4. It's almost impossible.
Yeah.
Right. 2 to 4 is a little more possible, but it's still difficult because there's no mainstream acceptance. But 3 to 4,
awareness bubble, like, facts rest upon facts, right? Like, you need to become aware of facts. That's what you're becoming aware of. And to become aware of facts in awareness bubble 4, well, that's just going to be very confusing because you don't have any facts on which they can sit.
It seems that way, right? There's no sanctioned, mainstream endorsed facts, right? By design. So only these kooky, crazy conspiracy theorists can come up with this. And I see you highlighting that next. So the entry-level books that I have introduced to many, many people over the years are, the one that I always recommend people read first is Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. So if you want to dip your toes in the water, you're not going to hear about reptilians or demons or anything like that in these books. But this is a book about a guy who just talked about how they would go down to Central and Southern America and talk presidents and leaders into accepting money from the World Bank, the WEF, that everybody knew they could never pay it back. And it's really fascinating to read that he just realized what he was doing and how he got out of it. So he explains it in great detail. So it's a great book. And after you're done reading the book, almost in unison, people say to me, I can't believe he's never been on Fox or CNN or the New York
Mhm.
Times, right? Because this is information the American people need. And that's kind of that first moment when people say, "Oh, I mean, he's got it sourced and footnotes, and right." He's like, "I can back all this up with proof," and so that's people think, well, then it's the media's job. They should have, right? They should have been interviewing this guy, and he should be testifying in Congress. And of course, that never happened. So that's a nice little light bulb for people. The second book that everybody talks about is the G. Edward Griffin book. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island. I actually think it's the third best book about the Federal Reserve, but this is the one that captured everybody's attention. And Jekyll Island is where a couple of very wealthy banksters from America and Europe hatched the plan for the Federal Reserve. Little tiny island in Georgia. And basically, you can boil a lot of all these problems down to whoever's got the money printer is going to control things, and that's the essence of this book.
Mhm.
They can shape our institutions, hire the people that they want, spread the narrative that they want, and this, you can point to this as the origin of how things happened here in America, at least. So those are great books if you want to get a taste. And it's Glenn Beck is the guy I couldn't think of earlier that got fired from Fox a couple months after he brought G. Edward Griffin on and did a segment with him. So that was out of bounds. I don't why they let it on. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, how did the controlling editors of the newscast even let that guy come on? But they did, and it happened, and it was interesting. So there's a little bit of revelation of the method there. Every now and then they got to let some guy telling big truths outside the mainstream appear in the mainstream briefly.
All right, let's blaze in a five here. Just have some interstitial commentary. So 1 and 4, 1 to 4. There's always blame. Someone's to blame. Like you're just like jumping up in awareness of who the villain is, right? It's all
Yeah,
you're always a victim. Just who's the villain? Who's doing it to me?
that's right. That's the most critical part of this podcast is that if you are in one of these 4 levels, life is going to become more and more difficult for you as time goes on. As a revealing and more disclosure happens, there's going to be more and more shocking disclosures and people to blame. And if you're trapped in those 4 bubbles, one of those 4 bubbles, it's going to be very hard on you energetically and vibrationally.
So, after you start to let go of blame a bit, and take responsibility, that's when this new awareness bubble creeps up. And we call that the metaphysical and spiritual awareness bubble. Now, you're the expert, Brad, so why don't you take it away?
Well, okay. I mean, and this is right. It takes the most courage, right? If we go to the Hawkins scale, it takes the most courage to step into this particular awareness bubble,
Mhm.
which I'll say is really as you climb the ladder, right? You basically have popped the other bubbles because you're aware of those bubbles, right? You know those things. So we could call this level 5 almost not a bubble, or a bubble that encompasses all the other bubbles.
It could be a bubble. Brad and I just don't know.
Okay, yeah, right. It's
We
just
might be in a bubble.
big bubble that wraps around those other 4 bubbles, and that's right. You're beginning to take responsibility instead of blaming other people. So that's how you kind of step into this. There's still people to blame when you get in here, right? You don't just step in all the way. But this is where you start to recognize that things you have imagined, things that you have put out, energies that you have put out, have led you to the situation you're in now, whether good, bad, or indifferent. And you really have to stretch, right? Now you have to stretch out of even mainstream religions, which is what a lot of people are holding on to in awareness bubble number 4. Right? We've got right demons and Satan and Lucifer, right, to blame for all our problems. So it's a big step. And of course, we did a little podcast on esoteric Christianity, which is, kind of an introduction to stepping a little bit further outside of the popular Christianity. But it is what happens. This is where empowerment comes from as well, right? This is where maybe, just maybe, I can control things in my life a little bit better if I understood how things worked a little bit better. And so there's some taking of responsibility.
Yeah, because prior to that, it's things will go better in my life when these, villains stop acting the way they act.
Right.
The end.
And it's right. So what you're really stepping out of is judgment. And that's one of the lowest vibrations to be in. And the thing that's so awful about the first 4 awareness bubbles is that you're trying to blame or fight against things you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, outside of your power, right? Outside of your influence.
Right. You're hoping somebody somewhere, a new president, the new political party, the white hats, whatever, are going to come in and sweep away all the bad guys. Once they do that, then my life will be perfect. Right. And of course, you wait your whole life because that never happens. And so this is really what it is. It's to get into this level, there has to be some courage and there has to be some taking of responsibility and releasing victimhood. Maybe the hardest thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So all the tough thing about awareness level 5 potentially is that you really have to come face to the fact that like all the stuff before is silly nonsense. It's all silly arguments and anger and judgment and fear and psychosis of a massive group of people that you're still mostly a part of. And you can see it everywhere and you feel it everywhere. And it's the reason that they have in the Matrix where that Cypher, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, what, screw this. Make me rich and I want to eat steak. Like, give me a blue pill. I'm going back. It's just, like take me back to materialism. Like, just let me just make money and forget all of this and get angry at people. Like, it's too hard. Right? That's what it feels like.
Yeah, no, that's a stage that almost everybody goes through in this level is they just wish they could go back like Cypher. And really can't, right? You can't unknow what you know. But people do go through that, right? Like if I just would have stayed in my bubble, then my career, my relationship, my health would have stayed better or improved or whatever. And so yeah, this happens. But I think one of perhaps the biggest payoff for navigating your way to this awareness bubble is that you begin to feel a great deal of compassion for people that are trapped in the other 4 awareness bubbles, because nobody's within their bubble. Nobody's wrong. I need to say this a couple different ways, I think, right? If all I'm aware of is what I've willfully chosen to stay within my bubble, then I'm right about who the villains and bad guys are. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the way Ayn Rand puts her epistemology as well. Like, like what's true, what appears to be what you'd call true is the thing that has no contradiction given the available facts.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. That's perfectly said. What I'm trying to say, right? And there's no opposing facts because I reject everything outside my awareness bubble.
Right.
Right? It's untrue. I don't care what David Icke or Alex Jones or Tucker Carlson said. They're lying conspiracy theorist Republican shills.
Mhm.
And so that enables you to maintain your grip on your limited set of facts in your awareness bubble.
I'll mention something else. Like I met a guy recently, and he was in awareness bubble 4, and he was all the way at the end of awareness bubble 4,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like full, like nothing he didn't know inside that awareness bubble. And
Mm-hmm.
he told me that he considered himself black pilled,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was essentially cynical that anything could ever change. That it's like it's all stuffed, and the only way to fix it is for us to round them all up and put them against a wall and give them their last cigarette, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that he like I prodded a few times and tried to you know mention some stuff from level 5, and there was like a wall, right? So by the time you get to, I think my point here is like by the time people reach awareness level 4, they have built up a wall, and it's very difficult to penetrate that wall.
Yeah. It evokes, right? At least the people in the first 3 levels have a solution, right?
Yeah,
If it just get rid of the Republicans, just get rid of the Democrats, just get rid of the bad guys at the intelligence agencies, right? Then everything will be better. So there's some hope in the first 3. But when you get to the tail end of the number 4, and I was there. I mean, I absolutely was there in 2008. You're like, oh my gosh, now that I understand all this, it's hopeless, right? There's nothing. I can't even convince people of this little basic fact. So, in other words, if I can't convince people that this is true, right, at the tail end of awareness level 4, then there's no hope for humanity, which is exactly where this guy, black pilled guy, is.
yeah,
Right. Once you realize how deep it goes and how big it is, you recognize basically everybody's brainwashed and they won't listen to you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And all your efforts, like you do your best to change to nudge someone one little nudge toward the light. And you're like, oh my God, it doesn't work. They run away. They go
Yeah.
further into the darkness.
Yeah.
Very confronting.
Right. You try it with your friends and family and coworkers and you get nowhere. I did exactly that when I came into this stuff, right? I couldn't get traction with anybody. And yeah, you feel it's depressing is what it is. So that's where that guy is right now. And hopefully he'll eventually find his way into bubble 5.
Hmm.
Maybe from this podcast, who knows? Anyway,
Um,
go ahead.
I think there's just one more thing I wanted to say. I can't remember what it is. Okay, take it. You go, bro.
Well, so we've kind of talked about this kind of introductory level entry point. There's we've talked about a million different sources in previous podcasts. I'm not going to spend any time with that. But eventually, right, this idea will come around to you that I am the creator of my own reality. That's going to hit you if you're dabbling in this awareness bubble. And it's a daunting idea, right? I picked it up first from the hidden hand and then the raw material, right? All within a 2-week period back in 2008. And it struck me, right? I didn't believe it. And I still had a million people to blame. But I was starting to listen to this idea a little bit. And of course, what people commonly call this, right, would be the opposite of victim consciousness. Right? They would refer to this as Christ consciousness. Obviously, a very Christian way to phrase it. But this is the idea that begins to penetrate right? The shell that's holding people in their awareness bubbles. And for the record, I don't know that anybody can come from awareness bubble 1 or 2 and get into awareness bubble 5. I just think it's way too much. I've already mentioned that. Only after you get a little deeper into awareness bubble 4 and see that they're, the uniparty is in charge, right? It's not the Republicans and the Democrats. They're all one entity, right? One bird with two wings, right? And once you can get through that black pilled phase, then I think there's something about that hopelessness that thrusts you into this last awareness bubble. Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. Like you gotta get to the point where you give up.
Yeah. It's like, gosh, I'm helpless. Nobody believes me. Nothing I can do. We're screwed. And I was definitely there. So who's the villain?
I'm 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 gonna mention quickly some podcasts that someone can watch after this one, if they haven't already, that are, about awareness level 5. The number 34, Judgment. Number 37, The Hidden Hand Drop from 2008. Number 38, What is the Matrix? Number 39, Esoteric Christianity. Number 40, How We Fix the World. Number 42, Demystifying Metaphysics. Number 45, Telling You Story. So yeah, we've been broaching number 5 recently.
Yeah, we've been building our way up to this, and this is obviously something. I'm going to get into why this is so important, I think, to come out now, and hopefully, even though I think a lot of our listeners are already clearly in level 5, they wouldn't be listening if they weren't. This is important for, friends, family, loved ones around them, and helping to better understand why they're in the bubble they're in, and why the great reluctance to step out of it. That's the point of this.
Yeah.
Explanatory, give them some explanatory things to work with. Quickly, the villain, of course, in awareness level 5 is there is no villain. If we're the creator of our own realities, then we create the situations for ourselves that result in what appears to be victimization. And it's a very, very difficult idea to even contemplate for a lot of people, certainly in level 1. And of course, this is expanded awareness, right? And it continues to expand. There's no limit to the expansion. You've now stepped out of the contracted awarenesses in the first 4 awareness bubbles. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah, let's get into this conclusionary stuff here. So everybody can check and think for themselves. I think the bubbles are clearly delineated.
Oh, you'll know where you are.
Right? As soon as you hear this, you say, oh yeah, I'm definitely in this bubble. And so you see what work you potentially have ahead of you. And I made this point earlier.
You might overestimate yourself by 1 level though. Like if you're in 1, you probably think you're in 2, and if you're in 3, you probably think you're in 4.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's pretty clear.
It could be
anybody who's watching Fox isn't listening to Alex Jones. That's my general sense of things.
Well, then just the first one then. Like I'd say everyone in 1 thinks they're in 2.
Yeah. There's definitely some gray areas between the 2 there. So I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again, is that this is where the compassion comes from, is that you can see that how right everybody is within their bubbles. Right? You can't say, oh no, you're wrong, right? No Republicans aren't the problem, or Democrats aren't the problem, or demons aren't the problem, right? They're have some information. Everybody has supporting backup information, right, to support their idea. So you go beyond the it's not the Republicans, it's the Democrats argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're no longer in that conversation. So how does somebody a lot of people get forced out of their awareness bubbles, right? It's almost not a choice, because there's so much discomfort in popping the worldview, because it's the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? Water, food, shelter, safety, security. And when you think you know the truth about who the bad guys are, right, you feel safe and secure. And popping that bubble is tremendously difficult, because suddenly what you thought you knew, as Mark Twain would say it, it's not what you know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know that just ain't so.
Which is pretty much
So,
everything.
right? So that's the big discomfort. It's not an intellectual thing, right? It's I don't want to find out that I may not be entirely right. And the reason I mean, in addition to better explaining this than Desmond and Hawkins, I think the reason I really wanted to do this is because all the information that I'm getting from my out there sources suggests that the disclosure is going to continue ramping up. And you mentioned the P. Diddy stuff, which is a shock to a lot of people. And it's just going to keep, who he's tied to, right, is, people in high positions of power, right? Economic power, political power, celebrity power, right? They're all tied up in his freak off parties and so forth. And right, it's the implications of it, that how did he get away with it for 25 or 30 years and without getting into trouble? That's where the short circuit happens and the opportunity to pop a bubble arises. Yeah.
Yep.
And what I'm hearing is that it's going to continue to ramp up until everybody's bubbles are popped. That's the direction things are heading. Not next month or next year, but it's just going to continue to progress. And putting your head in the sand and denying, dismissing, ignoring has been an effective strategy for people for a long, long time. And it's not going to be an effective strategy for much longer.
Certainly
And
isn't.
the
I can add a little
essence,
story to that. You want to
please.
hear something funny? Yeah, I
Yeah,
mentioned the hairdresser before. She told me that her husband or boyfriend, I don't know, father is a policeman. And I was like, you should tell that guy that he's enforcing policies, and they're not laws. They're man-written policies by a group of people that call themselves the government. And she totally got it. She's like, oh,
yeah.
I'm going to tell him.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what's coming.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Tell him he used to be, his occupation was a peace officer, right? At one point, instead of a policy officer. Yeah.
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 Notice how police sounds like policy? So I think the point you're getting at here is like the bubbles, everybody's bubbles are getting popped, and there's no keeping your bubble together.
Yeah.
And the more you try to keep together, the more pain you're going to suffer.
Right. Because there's got to be somebody to blame. And that blaming energy is going to exponentially magnify and amplify itself as time goes on. And because that energy is no longer going to be supported in what Matt and I are lovingly calling Novo Gaia, New Earth, which is where we're
we just
heading.
don't know whether to spell it Novo or Nova.
Right. So this is it. If you want to, and life as it proceeds is going to be you're just going to feel worse and worse and worse, because there's going to be more and more people to blame, right? As time goes on, who knows who's on the P. Diddy client list and the Epstein client list. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, by the way. We all know things that we don't talk about in our podcast that, vast majority of people on earth aren't aware of. And it's been suggested that all of that's going to eventually, it has to come up and out. And that's going to be extremely difficult for people in the other four awareness bubbles.
Okay. You want to
I
leave it
think
there?
that's,
'Cause
I think
it's pretty
so.
beautiful.
I think that's it. We ran quite a bit longer than an hour, but this was an important one. And I just want people to think about it a little bit, consider it, see who's in what bubble. And, for friends and family, at least, now hopefully you understand a little bit better that they're comfortable in their worldview, and popping that bubble isn't an intellectual problem. It's a comfort, right? Security problem for them. And, basically, if you don't help them pop it, then they're going to pop it the hard way. I call it the mass outrage and shock vortex. That's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if we trust Dr. Hammer and GNM a little bit, we know that the shock and outrage brings health problems.
So my conclusion would be that if you're in 4 and open to 5, or if you're transitioning, if you're currently making the transition from 4 to 5, or if you've gotten into 5 and you want to go further, take your power back. Our awesome course at the mindblownzone.com is exactly about that. It's exactly about going from 4 to 5 and deep into 5.
100%. You got it. A graceful entry point. For sure. Awesome.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's call it.
Yep. That's all I had. I think it came out well. I was afraid this was going to be under an hour, and we went way over, like almost a buck and a half. Anyway, I think it's important. I'm looking forward to getting it out there, and hopefully this will resonate with a lot of people and help them better navigate the coming times for themselves and for the loved ones around them.
Okay. Sweet ass. Well, thanks, Brad. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks,
And we'll see you
everybody.
next time.
See you next time. Bye bye.